Right, okay, so I've got a Rob Harvey joining me for a bit of a chat. So it's the man, the myth, the synth god. It's Mr. Rob Harvey. So how are you doing this evening?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, fed and watered and technically finished for the day, he says.
Technically, apart from the fact that you've been accosted by an insurrectionary futurist, of course.
Well,
Anyway.
but you've made massive effort this evening. Look at you.
Well, of course.
You know, fabulous, you know.
Quite
I feel
pleased
such a
with the-
tramp in just this t-shirt, you know.
Honestly, you could have at least wore a suit or something. Disgraceful.
Well, this is it, you know. How do you know I'm not wearing a suit? You know, this could be virtual.
Yeah, that is a good point. And anyway, I thought it, being as you seem to have dedicated so much of your life to trying to promote other people, I thought it's about time the tables were turned, and let's find out about the man behind all the radio shows and so forth. So let's find out where you come from in life. So have you always had a bit of an interest in the music scene, or has that come about through getting interested in radio or something?
No, I think music's always been a passion, a first love, and I think that goes right the way back to the days when we didn't have a good radio choice. You know, when basically it was national radio from the BBC. So I'd hear the music from there, from Radio One back in the day. Listening to music from radio, that was kind of what started me off there, and I've always enjoyed it. I kind of felt that's where I heard everything until I got old enough to go to gigs, and then you heard everything more, you know. But yeah, radio back in the day started me off. So it then became a view that actually I love the actual radio part, the actual conversation part, the actual jingles, and all the technical parts that went on. So that started me down the road of Anaracking about radio, but I didn't really pursue it. So music came first, then radio followed it, kind of thing.
So can you remember sort of when you first got that inkling that you really fancied being a radio presenter?
It was probably back in '89, and I can't remember how it came about, but I saw an opportunity to volunteer at a local hospital, and they had hospital radio. And hospital radio is actually, or was, the mainstay for a lot of radio presenters in the UK, because there wasn't such a thing as the internet and other things. The only way you could hear it is via the radio sets as it was. So for me, I got into radio via hospital radio in Barking in Essex. And I started volunteering in there, then you go around the wards and you collect requests. And then you kind of support the show. So your guests on the shows, and you read out the requests that you've got. You get comfortable, they get shown how to use the equipment. Then maybe when there's a slot around, you take on the show as well as doing the quest side of things. So yeah, hospital radio, Radio Barking, which is no longer, and the hospital's technically no longer, was where I started. Yeah.
And I've often heard of many presenters getting started in their first big break is hospital radio. Is it just internal hospital, or is it like broadcast from, and it might seem ridiculous me asking, but is it broadcast from an external location, or is it just sort of internal within a hospital or something?
Traditionally, hospital radio was broadcast within a cupboard or room within the hospital, and then piped through the hospital through a cable system. So therefore, it was only it wasn't really radio in the way you would know it, because it was piped through the system. I'm not getting technical about it, but basically it was piped throughout the system. And by each bed, there was like a little box that you could either plug your own headphones in, or you got the free headphones there, and the speakers in the sort of communal areas, but basically it's within the hospital. So it didn't actually broadcast out. But then the laws changed a little bit later, sort of probably about the 80s, 90s onwards, where they could apply for a short distance license, which basically meant they could go to within 5 miles of the locality of the hospital. So they actually could go on to like an FM waveband, a medium waveband. They could, whichever suits the area that they're in. So most hospital radio is broadcast internally, and even to this day, but quite a few have actually got to the level actually of broadcasting outside, so you can actually pick them up, outside. But you have to be within, as I say, I think it's within 5 miles of the actual hospital itself, because that's where the transmitter and the antenna will be.
You wouldn't be expecting to pick it up in, say, Doncaster when you're broadcasting down in London, for example.
Well, you'll be surprised. Our radio frequencies transmit and transfer. You can get on a good day radio stations from France. You could pick them up, the coastline. And way back in the day, Invicta Radio, which was right down in Kent, and because Kent sticks out a little bit further, you could pick it up in Northumberland because it had no block. It was quite across the sea, right the way up. So therefore, on a good day, you could pick up, a Kent radio station, hundreds of miles away. So it's possible that you could pick up
atmospheric conditions
hospital radio,
that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Influence it, definitely. Thinking about music, obviously, as that is obviously what you do, music broadcasting. What music was it that you first sort of like? What was that? Can you remember, say, the first record that maybe took your that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard, sort of thing? Like maybe the Teen record or something. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, back in the day, when you start, in my family, it was like if you liked a record, that was a birthday present. You get a 7-inch single, that kind of thing. So you kind of get those into. So I never really had, and I'm still a little bit like that to this day with the thought of genres, where I kind of don't really think about, because I think if I like that, I like it. So back in the day, my record collection could have things in it from Kate Bush. It could have things from Brotherhood of Man. It could have the Barron Knights, the novelty records. Because obviously it being a...
But can you remember a first one that sort of excited you? One which sort of maybe ignited, or was music sort of kind of always there, just as sort of almost like a cloud around you or something, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, music was always there in my flavours. Just trying to think, because the first record would have been a kind of 7-inch single. Yeah, and I think you'll probably go back to something like, I don't know, I think it was probably something, it's going to really shoot itself in the foot, but something like See You by Depeche Mode. I know that's in my top. I used to number the records.
You do seem quite keen on Depeche Mode, I have noticed, a few little tells here and there.
Just a wee bit, Well, it's, you get into a band, and then, I mean, luckily for me, in some respects, because they're fairly local to where I live, in the sense, so it always made you feel stronger to them. And I think when you kind of live in an area where the band grew up, or the band, you kind of think that's my band. And as long as they stay cultish, that, which they obviously they lost their cult status by the 90s. But that kind of makes it even more. Gives it more reverence to me, kind of. Well, it did back in the day when you kind of wanted to have your own clique of music. So it's probably a combination. I mean, if I had my vinyl available, I'd probably look through it now and probably say it's probably some other more embarrassing record like Baccarat, something like that, But
excuse me, are you saying Yes Sir I Can Boogie is an embarrassing record? I'll have you know that's my art anyway.
I said to you, obviously, one of the first records there was Depeche Mode, See You, but the Depeche Mode record that really kind of made me sort of more inspired by what you could produce was an album track, The Sun and the Rainfall. And that was only on the second album, but that was kind of one of those creative pieces of music where you could hear. Now I understand the technology, how basic it was, but how clever it was.
I mean, there's nothing wrong, I'd say, with basic. It's what you do with it. It's important.
Well, we were saying this back in the day when these bands
still advanced.
When these bands have bought this equipment and they had crates to put their keyboards on and stuff like that. They were finding, and technology. People go on about the 80s. Oh, it's 80s music. Its technology was just becoming affordable then. You can't just say 10 years is up and that's the end of it. We progress into sampling styles in the 90s, but the fundamental thing is we're still finding our way with the technology. So Sun and the Rainfall was one of the tracks there. Kraftwerk, I think, was one of the first bands that kind of, I just couldn't believe these guys were creating this sound. And so, and Showroom Dummies was like still, to me, an iconic track. The whole thing's iconic, and I just thought electronic music comes from Germany, comes from Europe. Europe is home of technology, not realizing a lot of synthesizing technology were either American or Japanese.
Yeah.
You know?
So much not from
you know,
Europe.
Dr. Moog and Overheim and stuff like that. You know, so it's so. But Showroom Dummies and Kraftwerk was still, to me, the leading creators of electronic pop music, and people like Jean-Michel Jarre definitely kind of got me going with that kind of that atmosphere. I think it's my.
So you think maybe due to, I know, like growing up kind of around that age when synthesizers are really hitting, when you're hitting, I don't know what age you were at the time, but sort of it's around that time when you start to notice music a lot more maybe, and you think that hitting at that time has probably influenced why you've ended up with Synth City, for example.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said, the bands, the musicscape was from people like Jean-Michel Jarre and Kraftwerk, but like my sort of favourite bands were kind of, they tried to rope bands together in every day, but like it was Depeche Mode, Ultravox, Gary Newman were the three kind of the three artists that kind of set off. Gary Newman and Ultravox are very similar to each other. In fact, they come from that kind of post-punk kind of vibe sort of thing. So, which is for me, I've always liked rock music. So this has might come as a shock to my listeners, but you know, before I sort of started taking electronic music really seriously, it was all about heavy metal and rock and stuff like that. And you know, not just cliche things like Guns N' Roses. I'm for proper 70s of stuff, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Aerosmith, stuff like that. That was always my stuff.
So you're a bit of a rocker at first, but
it's about energy, pomp, circumstance, a show, and
I'm never keen on that sort of thing.
No, you're very shy and retired.
I think it detracts from the music a bit if you dress up for it now.
Well, this is the thing about, for me, why I miss programs like, I know it's a slight tangent for us in the UK, or Top of the Pops, where you get to see your artists. And because they were going to be on Top of the Pops, they made the effort by actually splashing out of a look. Sometimes it was a look that was of the time. Sometimes it was a look of their own. But the point is, it made life a lot more exciting. And you thought, and you got inspired by that.
I know I was.
Music, you know, I mean, everyone who likes electronic music will put themselves down saying, "What the hell was that?" When Gary Newman first appeared on the telly, and they couldn't believe it, and they thought, "Why is he not smiling?" and stuff like that, and they thought it was all part of his image, but it turns out it was all part of him being really, really nervous. But you know, but that set a tone for artists behaving that way and performing that way and having that stony kind of face, because Gary Newman made it cool. But actually,
if you get to number one and you look like that, everyone's going to start copying it, whether or not you intended it.
And it's so popular music. You know, and you had a look to go with it. It's all part of life. Life is drab if you let it, and it's just nice to sort of have a bit of creativity. If you've got the ideas and the style, some people affect ideas and styles that they really can't pull off. But some people really just kind of naturally do that. And I don't mean sort of really avant-garde stuff. I'm kind of, you know, that sort of the days when Ultravox, for instance, were like sort of using that kind of 40s chic look. You know, they went for that for a while, and that kind of worked. It was kind of, you know, the Neuromantic club style that was accessible to everyone, because eyeliner and stuff like that was very light. Therefore, it kind of didn't clash with too many kind of groups. It was about smart suits, a bit flamboyant.
Well, you know, I have put on a tie for you tonight, you know, so, you know, I'm trying for you. It's so... also, just as an aside from all the music, I noticed you seem to have a bit of a connection with the RAF, is it?
Yeah, I must have had it in the blood for the volunteering side of it, but I've been in the voluntary... I was in the voluntary Royal Air Force, well, not the voluntary Royal Air Force, the Royal Air Force Voluntary Reserve for best part of 17, 18 years. So working with young people, going on taking on expeditions, trainings, learning to use weapons like rifles, fly planes like gliders and stuff like that. Work with inner city kids and kids from different parts of the country as well. So yeah, that was alongside a job. So I was within the RF Reserve as an officer for
Have
a
you
number of
ever
years.
flown a plane then?
Not piloted, but I've flown in
You've
many
flown
planes.
in
Yeah,
one, yeah.
yeah.
And not just commercial liners.
Yeah, no. When we originally, from this small aircraft called a Chipmunk, which was originally way back, was a trainer aircraft for the RAF, flown up sort of aircraft like Bulldogs, helicopters, flew to Cyprus in Hercules. So, yeah, and commercial airliners on it as well. But and I think the only aircraft I've ever flown that actually was able to fly myself was a glider. So I got as far as getting glider wings, but that was as a kid. And then I returned the favour by joining the organisation as an RAF reserve officer, so I could then support the young people.
So what's it meant to you to be that sort of support for young people then? That is something very satisfying for you. I mean, the thing is, you must obviously be a rather community-led person with the fact that you choose to broadcast to people, but can you point to any particular moments things have been particularly satisfying from doing that stuff?
Well, if I take the cadet side of thing, the RF cadet side of thing, that's always been, I retired from that in 2012, but it's always been something that's been really rewarding for me. So you're working with young kids that are sort of like 13 upwards. For me, being in the city, it was inner city kids from like East London and stuff like that. And you're taking them on expeditions to places like Wales, and they go to Snowdon and up these mountains and stuff like that. They're seeing things that they kind of thought that don't exist, and they're really kind of having to put themselves through the ringer to sort of get from one place to another. You see them grow to learn to operate a plane, glider, for instance, and then become 18, 19 and get their own pilot's license. And a lot of them actually get qualifications from the organisation, and then obviously, that improves their standing.
Definitely improve their
life
prospects
at the moment.
in life, definitely.
Yeah. It's not just it's not like a youth club where you're going and sort of playing pool, nothing wrong with that. But this is like where you're getting opportunities to learn a qualification, take responsibility, and really sort of kind of boost your confidence. So it kind of sits alongside school, really, in some respects, for a lot of them.
So anyway,
very rewarding.
So moving on to sort of more present times, perhaps. When did Phoenix FM come about for you, and how?
So Phoenix, well, for me at the time, I was presenting for a commercial radio station called Time FM in Romford. And they're still broadcasting. They've been broadcasting for a number of years. They're part of a group that kind of got up and down in the size kind of thing, but they're still broadcasting fairly successfully. But as always in radio, hence why I've not done it as a career, it doesn't pay well, and contracts can be short, and therefore that was coming to a kind of end in 2009 with the change arounds. So I heard of a community radio station in Brentwood, and I thought to myself, I come from hospital radio, as long radio is radio to me, and so therefore I applied to Phoenix FM at the time in 2009 and started with them. So I started on a show called the Sunday Sofa originally, which was just basically a light mixed music show with occasional guests in the studio. Something what I was doing on Time FM, to be honest with you, where I tried to get bands in, because it's more fun than just having yourself talk all the time if you can have a guest in. But yeah, started with Phoenix FM back in 2009, and then an opportunity came around about a year or so later, I think it was, for a morning show, breakfast show. So I took the breakfast show on. I was still supporting Time FM slot, so I was doing the early breakfast show for Time FM, which was meant to finish at the time that I meant to start the other show. So I used to have to sort of nip into Studio 2 and re-record or record my links for the last hour of the show so that I could drive down to Phoenix FM and start at 7. because I couldn't time jump just then. So yes, at that time, for 2009, I was doing 2 shows at Saturday morning, not 2009, 2010 rather. I was doing 2 shows at the same time. And then I found that with the breakfast show, there was a little bit of a freedom on what I could play outside of the playlist. So therefore, I started to drop in a lot of bit of Depeche Mode here and there, a bit of electronic music here and there. And at that time, I didn't have access to a lot of the quality, unsigned artists that I get the chance to play now. So I was drip feeding, and the festival came along, the Baz Festival, and that gave me an opportunity to meet some new artists. That gave me like people like Space Boy, Shiny Darkness, Tenek, people like those who've done it, seen it, got the T-shirt. I mean, Tenek, for instance, have supported Gary Newman many times. So it's not as if these people are amateurs because they haven't got a record label attached to them. So I got to know these guys and got to sort of get to play their music. And then I was starting to get submissions from other people of that kind of style, that kind of ilk. And so the Saturday morning breakfast show became a slight electronic breakfast show. And I was able to have guests in the studio like Modivar and EMT and Shiny Darkness came in. A couple of them played their first ever gigs live. I mean, EMT's gig apparently was their first live gig together. Shiny Darkness was the first time they played in the UK, so it was an odd time to do a show, 7 till like 10. Getting bands to do it, especially if you're a vocalist. I remember Chris from Marvin going to Studio 2 and warming up his vocals. And it's like because that time of the morning, it's just like you've not spoken to anyone since you got up. But yeah, so that kind of progressed for about 5 years, and then it was getting to a stage where I was just doing that show, but it was, if I was going to go to a gig that night, which often I was, because I was getting asked to DJ at these music gigs now, which was a lovely honour to be asked. But when you're kind of getting up at sort of 5 o'clock in the morning, and then you're going to be doing a show, then you'll be DJing from 8 that evening to like 2 in the morning, you realise something's got to give. So
it starts to get a little tricky, that.
Yeah, so I kind of looked for sort of a change in time, and Tuesday came along. It was originally 10 o'clock to midnight, which is a bit of a pain because obviously I have to get up for work the next day. But I took on that. So I moved the show, and I was doing these odd specials beforehand. So the reason for Synth City was a little bit. It was these specials that I was doing every so often when there was a gap in the rating and in the schedule on a Saturday night. If they needed someone to cover, I would do a cover show. But because I thought Saturday night needs to be dancey, therefore, if I'm going to play electronic music, it needs to be electronic music that's fairly upbeat. And therefore, I kind of created the name Synth City. I thought, that'll do. Yeah. And then I sort of did the show as Synth City. But they were just like one-off specials. And then when I got that opportunity to move to Tuesdays and finish on doing the Saturday breakfast show, the Tuesday show became Synth City. So it's kind of meant to be, not synths only, there is guitars, there's drums, that kind of thing in the music, but it's synths in the lead. So that's why it's Synth City, really.
Electronic and synth sort of fueled music, at least. So who in particular right now would you say is kind of really attracting your attention in the underground scene, perhaps?
Well, for those who listen to my show will probably kind of hear a regular selection of mixture, but there's it's getting bigger and bigger, the selection. For instance, like there's massive amounts of music coming from Sweden and from other parts of Europe. But for me, like people like, say for instance, Empathy Test, they're just working their socks off all the time,
gigging to strength, aren't they? They're really doing well.
Yeah, and they're holding to their style on what works for them, and then chipping. Obviously, if it weren't for COVID, which knackers for everyone, which a lot of people try away and they're going, oh, it doesn't really work. But you kind of got to stick to what you like, what works for you.
Yeah.
And you have to give a little bit. I don't mean sell your soul, but you have to kind of give a little bit to what's going to be accessible, because you can't then blame things for not being narrow if you're going to be narrow. But yeah, they seem to be fairly. I don't want to use the word commercial, but that got a commercial angle. But they never said that. I'm enjoying Strange Eyes, Tenek. I'm hoping Tenek kept back together. Promenade Cinema from up your neck of the woods. One of my favourite kind of discoveries of a number of years ago, along with Berlin Trilogy. We've kind of had the old-fashioned drama, but with a very young ethic. They're not. I'm in my 50s. They're not kind of. They're old enough to be my kids, yet their sound is still has respect to the back story of those sounds, but has a new sound.
Can definitely hear those sort of Ultravox and John Fox sort of influences creeping in at times.
We have a little bit of Lady Gaga in some cases,
and
which
possibly
is
a bit of Depeche Mode on occasion. But I mean, the thing is, those acts do sort of influence us all. They influence me to some extent as well. They are those sort of touchstones in electronic music that we can't help but take into us, I think.
Yeah, it's not anything to do with us. It's everything to do with record labels and the media business. If you think about that, it's nice to be part of a cult and follow something when you're a kid. But when you like something, you like something. So in going back to what I said, like in the early, when I've got comedy records from Barra Nights, I mean, one of the greatest weird situations of ever was I loved Vienna, one of my favourite songs ever from Ultravox. So I bought that, loved it. And then this novelty record came out from Joe Dolce, Shut Up Your Face.
Yes, I loved that I think it was about 5 years old, and I was mad keen on that.
Well, me too. Loved it because I love the idea of something that's kind of catchy, a song that's kind of fun. So I bought that, and it punched Vienna off of number one. It's kind of the greatest.
So you're partly to blame for Vienna not getting to number one. Then.
Exactly. That's a claim to fame there. So, but bringing it back to now, and it's the same kind of thing. So you say about influences, you kind of, it's like, oh, you can't like that because it's this. You can't like that. You can't like that. So it's nice when bands do collaborations with people that you wouldn't think are actually part of their scene. But they are, like yourself, are musicians, and musicians don't usually think of things in that way. They think of, I've got a melody, I've got a song, that works, and they go in that kind of style. Now, if they're classically trained, they might have a stronger base to the style, but, it's genres for record companies.
Yeah.
And there's not and record companies don't really exist these days.
No rules, I say. I'm not keen on that sort of thing. So I think we've sort of pretty much covered all bases. So I think it's pretty much good enough to leave it there. And obviously, I know you've been dying to say all along that Really John Doyle Band is your absolute favourite band of all time, of course, but that would be a bit embarrassing to say. But
well, one thing I will say, I have to say, with regard to what you said, is every time I've got the opportunity to see you guys live, like you said, I don't care for the rules. You don't care for the rules on stage, and it's a case of I'm going to put a performance. We're going to do a show, and if you like it, that's great. If you don't, I'm going to like it.
Yeah.
And you obviously enjoy what you do. It comes across, and from me, I've DJ at a few events that you've been playing at. I'm with the sound guy, and so it's only the sound guy who's fretting as you flay around the floor.
What on earth is he going to destroy next? So, anything else you'd just like to add before we finish everything off? Just in case there's anything I've missed, anything you'd like to just additionally put on, say hello to anyone or anything like that. But anything you would like to add.
I would like to really like to say a strong thanks to everyone who actually tunes into my Tuesday show from 8 till 10.
And where can that be found? PhoenixFM.com or Phoenix 98 FM.
Yeah, it's because at the end of the day, I do this for fun. I'm not paid to do the show, and when people submit their music or I find the music, and then you get reactions, which is lovely, and you hear it from people's comments. It's a buzz, and it's a buzz for the bands, I dare say. It's a buzz for me because you kind of think, like what I like. Yeah, you think it works as well, because that's what I go for. I go for, does it work? Not, do I like it? So I do play tracks. This will come as a little bit of a shock, maybe. But I do play some music I don't like on my show.
You even play me, so.
You're looking for another one there.
Yeah, just but fishing for compliments is that's 90% of what I do. Yeah.
But no, it's a case of I look for, does this work on radio? Does it connect to other things? And do I like it? I mean, do I like it? Obviously, what is I can't dislike it totally, but I might say I'll play it once or twice, and then I probably won't play it anymore. And if I get loads of comments on it, then it's different. It's a case of like, well, I might not like it because, there's a track you buy or an album you buy, and there's a track on the album you go, oh, that's a diabolical track, and later on down the line, it's your favourite track off the album. So we all can change our taste in music. So I kind of have to kind of go through a raft of music, and sometimes I go, yeah, I don't kind of like that, but I think it works, and I think everyone's like it, and then next down the line, it's a favourite tune. So hence why I played Green the other night. It's a really good composition. We like the little Human League nod.
Yes. It surprised me sort of how popular that
guitar
has been actually. So that's kind of interesting how that's worked. So anyway, thank you for you've taken a bit of time out to have a bit of a chat. So as I say, Phoenix FM on Tuesdays.
On Tuesdays.
8 till 10 p.m. So that's when people want to tune in. So thank you for all your efforts in supporting the electronic music scene and music in general. It's always very much appreciated from everyone. So thank you very much for everything you do.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right, and bye for now then.